Somebody in my family said that I had the attention span of an adolescent fruit fly, and there may be some truth to that, but I think the core principle is that our family has a motto that Sturms never quit, and that goes throughout the whole gamut. I was at the top of my game when I was diagnosed with cancer on January 21st, 2009. During that first year, not much changed because I was taking oral chemo. But on the following January, they had to put me on IV chemo, which I'm still on. And when that happened, everybody was worried. The insurance companies were all worried about me because I was doing multi-billion-dollar transactions as a lawyer, and they were worried about me making a mistake or missing something. So I went from being the corporate chairman and running a big law firm to being put on long-term disability.
Mm.
So it took a little bit to adjust. There were some other things in my life that happened during that time frame. But as a result of those things, one of my docs said that I needed to see a psychiatrist, which was one of the best things that ever happened. And I haven't learned how beneficial that was until recently. But the core principle, again, is don't quit. So what was I going to do? I didn't quit the job. The job quit me. Yeah, I was 54 years old. What do you do? It's kind of ridiculous.
Mm.
So my photography was here. I had this wonderful home in Jackson, Wyoming. And so I started taking pictures. And after about 18 months, the local hospital here asked me to do an exhibition, and we raised a bunch of money for the hospital. So photography started doing well. And then there was the 2017 eclipse. And so I said, I'm going to do an eclipse thing on this picture. So we did eclipse photography, which I'm still doing. And the next eclipse is August 12th of this year in Spain. It's a sunset eclipse, which is one of the most beautiful things that you could ever see.
I bet.
And so that worked well. I had been doing a Caring Bridge blog forever, and we converted that into the first book, and now there'll be a second one sometime soon. On
Mm.
that, written two other nonfiction books. I think the best thing to describe me is I have the attention span of an adolescent fruit fly because I get a lot of things done, but it's hard for me to focus on any one thing long term. But you don't quit. And what happened with cancer was it taught me the lesson it can surprise you at any time. So you
Hmm.
have to be prepared. You have to have a group that's supportive. You don't quit, but you have a team, and you create a team to keep you going and to be with you.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. You'd mentioned you saw a psychiatrist during that time. What was that like for you?
My regular doc knew that what happened in the law firm, I had also lost my dog,
Mm.
and my wife had served me with divorce papers.
That's a
And
lot at once.
yeah, he said, you need to see somebody. I ended up with an extraordinary professional, and she had treated a lot of women with breast cancer. And so she knew what was coming before I did. And it was just a spectacular relationship. I still see her today. But one of the things that happens to everybody is cancer fatigue syndrome. And the NIH has said cancer fatigue syndrome during survivorship is associated with higher mortality rates. My doc knew that, and I would fall asleep in the middle of the afternoon all the time. And so I went on a prescription for a medicine that I'm still on that has eliminated those issues, but it's given me the ability to work and be productive. Most institutions that I'm aware of, the advice they give to people who are having that problem is get a little bit more exercise and get more rest. That doesn't do anything. NIH has said it doesn't do anything. So it's just, as they've said, it's a very serious issue, and it can increase higher mortality rates if it's not addressed. And my psychiatrist was so good at it, she knew how to address it and took care of that problem for me that has gone away since then and still gone.
You'd mentioned you're having treatment still. It's been more than 6,000 days.
It's more than 6,200 days of oral chemo and more than 600 20 days of IV. And next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, I'm at the hospital from where I do B treatment.
And tell us a little bit about why the treatment's been so long.
Well, first off, I guess if it's incurable. And my daughter, who talked to my oncologist, my middle daughter, when this first happened, was told I probably had 2.5 years to
Wow.
survive. And we've contained it, but every time we've tried to reduce it, it just comes flying right back in a big way. Hopefully, someday they'll find a cure that'll work for me. Now, there are very aggressive treatments that might give me a better result, but might not. But the mortality rate on those is maybe 5 or 10 times the mortality rate that I've got now. I'm very functional with the treatments that I have to have. So why take the risk with something with a higher mortality rate?
We also talked about the number of pills that you take. That's what's
Well,
really keeping your energy where it's at and your mind in a good place.
yeah, absolutely. I'm in the gym every morning promptly at 7 a.m. and that's being lazy to do it at 7 to 8:30. But I do 30 minutes of cardio, 30 minutes of light weights, 30 minutes of Pilates, and some other things. The medicines that I take permit me to do that, but I take about 39 pills a day. It used to be 31, but it's now 39. This is my wonderful little pill box that I use. And it's purple so I don't lose it. And I take pills when I get up in the morning, and then I take pills at lunch, and then dinner, and then before I go to bed. And I take my daily chemo at night. As for
Mhm.
some people, it knocks them out. One of the wonderful things I've been blessed with is when I lay down to go to sleep, I am generally out within 30 seconds.
That's
I lay down.
amazing.
The flip side of that is if I go to bed too early or fall asleep too early, I can wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
And that's when
Um,
you start your day.
yeah, I try normally start at about 5, so I get 2 hours in before I go to the gym. But the gym's critical too, because uh, getting the cardio activity is amazing. I live at 6,900 feet, I think.
Mm.
It's harder to breathe for everybody up here. So if you work on cardio and if you've been doing it for a long time, you acclimate. And so I'm very acclimated to the environment. And the meds just take care of it. I really don't have any side effects. I've had a lot of surgeries, and some are non-cancer related surgeries. One of the interesting things is I've never gotten COVID. And I think that's probably attributable to a medicine I take that has a high level of zinc in it, but it's an eye medicine. And I flew back and forth to New Haven, Connecticut, or actually Hartford, and drove to New Haven on commercial airlines during the
Mm.
entire COVID period, and I never caught anything. So I'm very blessed. That high level of zinc probably has a lot to do with it.
You're not somebody who should have ever gotten COVID. It probably wouldn't have
No.
been a good with everything else, but that's incredible. And I'm sure the exercise makes a big difference.
The interesting thing is when I started, I had my oncologist, a gastroenterologist surgeon who was spectacular. And then I had Stacy Hund, who is a physical therapist, but she's also an exercise physiologist. And my insurance company paid for me to have 4 to 5 days of physical therapy with her, an hour at a time,
Yeah.
private. And she taught me so much. She got me into Pilates. And I love Pilates because it gives you the flexibility and helps you work on balance.
Yeah.
And the older you get, the more balance is important. It's helped everything helped my golf game. And it's just been a good time. Now, last year was kind of rough because I had a tumor on my spine at L3 that had to be removed. And
Mm.
so I'm just now back into being able to swing a golf club. So I've got a lot of work to do because I had a +2 handicap before this happened.
And now you got to make up for it.
Yeah, I do.
Was the tumor on your spine cancerous?
I'll find out next week. I've had tumors on my spine and in my lungs since this started, and they have
Mm.
not grown. Now,
That's good.
the one that popped up on L3, which was on the root nerve, was pretty nasty because I could sit down and write a book for 13 hours a day and it didn't bother me. But the minute I stood up and put pressure on it, it did. My surgeon was very happy with me because I lost a bunch of weight, 25 pounds or so. He got me down to under 150 pounds, which is the weight I had when I was active in the military. And that takes all the pressure off it. So when he did the surgery, I reduced the pressure vertically. People don't realize that if you lose, let's say, 20 pounds, your knee problems probably most cases will go away. And if you do the workouts, you may be able to avoid certain types of orthopedic surgeries by just doing that.
You've got 5 books, and it sounds like maybe a 6th one underway.
There's number 6 and number 7. The novel is finished, and it's a multi-generational, multi-family saga, a 6-book series. And so this is book 1, and I'm writing book 2 now. And then I've got the book called Then Hope, the compelling promise of integrated cancer care, and the results that are just knocking it dead. And it's about the benefits of integrated cancer care and how it's changed the survival statistics. For instance, my survival, instead of 2.5 years now, is 30. It's just incredible. The book will probably be released around the 1st of April. There was a study done that looked at 56,000 plus patients who worked with integrated processes, and the mortality rates dropped dramatically. In that initial report, which is a couple of years old now, it showed anywhere between 9% and 90% reduction in mortality. And
Wow.
most of them today are above 40% reductions in mortality. Even some of the worst cancers, they're really huge. In breast cancer, which is probably the lowest increase, there's been a 14% reduction in the risk of death. And the debt-free survival rate has gone from 42% to right at 60%. If you looked at a drug company, if they could produce those kind of results with a pill rather than a bunch of doctors and other professionals working together, that
Mm.
drug would be probably worth tens, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars in market cap for the company.
Yeah,
So the
absolutely.
so the value of multi-care integrated, multidisciplinary integrated cancer care teams is staggering. What I didn't know is I put together my own team. There are a lot of people who work in silo-based or patients in silo-based oncology practices. And the studies have shown that there is zero increase in the reduction of mortality if you're in a silo-based practice where they're not multidisciplinary people. And some of the big hospitals are still using silos. Some people even have silo-based practices.
Can you talk about the difference between the team that you put together and what a silo-based
Well,
practice is?
just to give you an example, there are about 25 disciplines that you need. I used 5.
Okay.
And so you're going to have your medical oncologist. And I believe you have to have a psychiatrist. And that's important because of narcolepsy and fatigue syndrome issues, where they're the best people to assess it and prescribe the 2 medicines that are needed. I had a surgical oncologist because I had to have some pretty nasty abdominal surgeries. You need a
Mm,
pathologist for sure, a radiologist, hematologist. Then the most important member of the team, I think, is the navigator or the guide, because they will be able to assess what's going wrong. If you have low energy levels, they can figure out that you need to see a psychiatrist. The oncologist isn't probably going to write the prescriptions for that area, because some of them, in some states, they're not permitted to, because you need to be a psychiatrist to write the scripts. So you'll have a nurse oncologist, and you need probably a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant. But you also need the PA. But then you get outside that group, you need a physical therapist, no doubt. In Jackson, where I live, I've got Dr. Abby, that's her first name. See her 1 day a week. And then you might need a speech pathologist. You probably need a dietitian.
mm.
It turns out that I need that now because with chemo, my protein levels are way too low. So we're having to figure out what I can eat to do that. Then the other ones you may need an oncology social worker, just a general psychologist, a genetic counselor. And
Mm.
one of the things about genetics is when you first diagnose, one of the tests that they should run immediately is a full genetics panel. And that will help them diagnose the right kinds of medicines you should take. When I got diagnosed, they weren't doing that at all. And I still haven't had a full genetics panel done. I was at the airport getting ready to go give a speech at the University of North Carolina, and my phone rang, and they did biopsies on me in December, and now it's January 21st. And the person on the other end of the phone was a dermatologist and said, Glenn, we got the results back from your biopsies. And I said, okay, whatever. She said, no, you got to come in tomorrow. You got cancer. I said, what? I had no idea it was
Not
coming.
expecting that at all. So that threw you for a loop, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. And I described that in my book, Cancer Set Me Free. But that first day or two was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
But then I decided something. I wasn't going to let cancer define me. I was going to spend my life making sure I put a smile on somebody's face every day. And that's just a wonderful thing to do because it puts a smile on your face.
Yes.
And I've taught my kids the value of a tip that somebody doesn't expect. And if you give somebody a tip that they don't expect, it always puts a smile on their face, no matter how big it is, because it means you care about them and you appreciate what they did for you. There's another thing that I preach to my friends and family. We must all give up hope for a better yesterday. We can dramatically impact the future by what we do,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't fix what we did yesterday or what happened to us yesterday. Those are the kinds of things that I learned to do, but not letting cancer define me, number one. And number two, knowing that I wasn't going to quit. And I had a lot of things to do to try to make the world better. It meant that I had to figure out what the best way to manage the disease was, to have energy so I could do things.
Absolutely. It is true. You want to have that energy so you can continue to do the things that you love to do.
All my art, especially my photography, 100% of the revenue for that goes to children's health issues. And I was talking to some folks about the issues and things. I said, what studies are you doing for long-term cancer survivors? And the answer was basically, we don't study that. And I said, why? Isn't that what everybody wants to be to start with? Now they want it gone, but wouldn't they like to be, if you can't get rid of it, wouldn't they like to be alive and then have the energy and the mental
Hmm.
acuity to handle everything? It's not a big study area. Now, it's also the insurance company should be paying for those studies because I'm their nightmare.
Right.
Yeah,
You're sucking them dry.
yeah. Oh boy, it's well over $1 million a year.
Yeah.
And why aren't you studying it to figure out what you can do to maintain my quality of life, but reduce the costs? Where are the studies for that? So maybe I don't have to take 39 pills anymore. Maybe I can get away with 10.
Yeah.
It's nuts, but we study long-term stuff. It's just,
Mind blowing. It's left up to us to do that and to try
yep.
and figure out, is there something new, different, better that I could be doing that I'm not doing today?
I always grab the experts, multiple experts in multiple disciplines to do it. And we were very successful doing things like that. So when I got diagnosed with cancer, I ended up just intuitively doing the same thing. And what's coming out now is that team approach is what's critical in solving the issue, in
Hmm.
solving the quality of life issue.
I
So
think so too.
one of the things that happened, part of my 55 surgeries, is the
Gee.
5 detached retinas in my left eye and the one in my right, torn retina in my right. And knock on wood, I haven't had that happen in the past 5 years, but for 5 years I was dealing with a detached retina at least once a year. And there are some vitamins you can take that
Mm.
will materially offset some of the keto side effects. The NIH put out a requirement that I found that all doctors report any eye related matters for anybody who is on systemic chemo. I was on it and I put together the report. The other
Was it
thing,
the chemo that caused the issues with the eye?
there's a correlation clearly,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure there was causation. That's causation in the scientific sense. Now, do I think it caused it? Yeah, I do,
Yeah.
no doubt. But because when we cut back on one of the chemo agents and changed another one, it stopped happening. It's okay. To give you an example, I had liver failure at one point, and I was on the liver transplant list, and they couldn't figure out what had caused it. What was happening was I had perfect liver function, and all of a sudden my AST and ALT, which are liver enzymes, were doubling regularly. And so I sat down, and over a 2 year period, I looked at everything in my life that had changed. Quality of life issues, whether I had a pet or not. I mean, everything, and then back to the medicine. And then I put a delay factor in it to look at what happened on a 30-day delay, 60-day, and 90-day delay. When I did that, there was a correlation coefficient of 0.96 with the medicine they had added. And so I go back to the docs at Yale and said, look at this. And they said, well, there's clear correlation, but that drug was tested so much, it's crazy. And they said, there can't be causation. And I said, if I quit taking the drug and my liver gets better, would we all say that there's causation then? And they all kind of looked at each other and they said, well, then we don't know. And I said, I'm not taking it again.
Right.
6 weeks later, the blood test showed my liver enzymes were back to normal. I don't know many people who can do correlation coefficient analysis. There are not many,
Right.
especially at our age. But you can make common sense. And if you see something on a timeline, and then you look that after you went on that, something happened, you need to
Mhm.
aggressively look at it. Again, you've got to create your own team and you're part of it. And you're responsible for things. They were ready to do a liver transplant probably within 6 or 8 weeks on me.
Oh my gosh.
It was in bad shape. But
Yeah.
it turned out that it was a pain med that caused it. And we did a lot of research on it. And there's now a black box warning label on that medicine and the correlation with my chemo agent. I feel good about that because something positive came out of what happened to me. And hopefully we're preventing it from happening to anybody else.
Yeah.
So
Everybody reacts differently to a drug. I was on tamoxifen and it wreaked havoc on me in ways that was going to put me 6 feet under. And I knew in my heart and soul it was the drug causing all the
right.
problems that I was having, the strokes, the brain aneurysms, which led to a craniotomy. And it was
Wow.
finally a neurosurgeon who is a specialist in strokes that said, you got to get off this thing. If you have one more, it could be the big one that takes you down. And I have friends who are on tamoxifen and they've had no issues whatsoever. I remember screaming to these doctors saying, I think I'm having an allergic reaction to this drug. I don't want to be on it anymore. No, it's not the drug. It's all the surgeries that you had. You haven't recovered yet. It always seemed like they were grasping for something else. I
It,
tell people when you start any kind of medication or drug, if something changes in the following weeks, it's likely to be the drug or medication that you're on, right?
Absolutely. I had a similar issue last year because of the pain issues I was having, because of the tumor where it was in the root nerve. And you'll be reading a lot about this thing, but the pain was just extraordinary. And they tried to put me Oxycontin, and Oxy doesn't do anything for me. I figured out that the best thing was something called Pamperin, which is generally used by women, and that helped a lot. But then I got in a situation around close to Memorial Day where the pain was extraordinary. I was in with Dr. Abby, and she stopped working with me that day and said, "You've got to go to the emergency room right now. This pain's
Mm,
insane." They gave me a Z pack, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1
mm,
prednisone on that was Monday, and that evening I didn't eat anything for a week. My daughters couldn't get me on the phone. And my daughter finally had a friend of mine come see me and take me to the emergency room. They couldn't figure out what happened. They were the ones who prescribed the prednisone. They didn't understand it. And so I was in bad shape. I was actually in something called ketoacidosis, which is
mm.
really scary. It's close to
Yeah.
death. And so they flew me to another hospital. They couldn't figure it out. I got a lot better. The big problem was I hadn't had anything to eat or drink that week. No water at all. I don't drink alcohol. And once I got food in me and water in me, I was better. But what caused me to go into that comatose state It was a multi-factor drug interaction problem. A very good neurologist saw me. The doctors here who caused the problem thought I had amnesia and dysphagia. I may have been having onset of Alzheimer's. And so the neurologist that I saw gave me all the tests, and I was doing the math quicker than he was. And
I'm not surprised.
I'm doing the other tests in crazy ways, yeah. And he finally said, "There's no amnesia." My son-in-law was in the room because I was getting kid supervision of me. I said, "There's no amnesia, no dysphagia, zero evidence of any form of dementia." He said, your father-in-law's never going to have one of those issues. He said, "Hey, we have his test from 30 years ago from the military. I don't know if he's as fast as he was then with all these things,
Mm.
but he's faster than I am." And so he said it was caused by predazone's interaction. Then he told me, and I have not researched this to confirm it, but he said prednisone for people over 60 has to be very carefully prescribed because it could have the impact that it had on me.
I
Um,
took prednisone. I was sitting in my car, the car was stopped, and everything felt like it was moving. I started having cognitive issues. We went to the emergency room, and I'll never forget the nurse and the doctor looked at me and said, "What are you taking for your pneumonia?" And I thought, "My pneumonia? What are you talking about?" I said, "I've been on prednisone 4 times a day." You could see on their faces somebody effed up. And it
yeah,
was that drug that caused all the problems. And I was borderline turning 60. So that's an interesting study.
the other thing is the funny part about it is I don't drink. I haven't drank for 30 years. And my daughter was there and knew it. And my blood alcohol level was 2.5.
On the prednisone?
Yeah, not 0.25, 2.5.
Right. Unbelievable.
The reason was I was in ketoacidosis. I was in the hospital like 18 hours later, did a blood test, and I was at still at 2.5. If you're drunk and you drink a lot of alcohol, after 18 hours, if you haven't had a drink, it's going to mostly be gone. I was still at
Right.
2.5. They couldn't figure it out. It just scares you because the neurologist, when he looked at it, and the folks at IHMC looked at it and said, "You're in ketoacidosis. And ketoacidosis creates alcohol in your bloodstream." She said,
No kidding.
those two things are first year medical school issues that should have been caught, and you
Oh,
should have been okay immediately because once that's caught, you can fix it. But the people who prescribed the prednisone were the ones who couldn't figure out what was wrong and diagnosed with these crazy things. And you've got major drug interaction issues when you're taking as many prescriptions as I am. And you've got
hmm,
to be hyper concerned. So I had liver failure with one situation, and I was in ketoacidosis on another situation because doctors prescribed stuff and then didn't follow up, didn't do anything. And then I went back to the emergency room. The people who wrote the prescriptions couldn't figure out what had caused it for me.
because there was too many drugs to look at.
Yeah, but there's also, and this is what is highly irritating. My oncologist, my psychiatrist, my other medical doctor that I think so much of Dr. Vic Reddy, I've got their cell phone numbers. And in my road ID band that I wear, it has my complete medical history. And it starts by saying, if I am not cognizant of to talk about something, if I'm not doing well, call Dr. Francine Foss on her cell. And here's her cell phone number. I wear that on my hand. And it's right there. So if I'm not cognizant, you need to call that doctor.
Right.
She's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I believe she's the former head of NIH hematology and hematology oncology. But she's a world-renowned physician in my field for cancer. So people say, how did you get to her? Otis Brawley, who's the former chief medical officer and chief scientist for American Cancer, and I knew each other, and I called him up when I got diagnosed, and he sent me to Dr. Foss, said she was the best doctor in the world for it. And I have her cell phone number. I've always had her cell phone number. Dr. Reddy, who is the head of gastroenterology and did the first robotic surgeries in gastro years ago, I have his cell phone number.
Mhm.
Most of my doctors I have their cell phone number. And do I ever use it? No. I send them a text and say, can you call me? But call them, it's an emergency, then they know it is. But the great doctors want to have contact with you if there's a problem. They're research people and they're also caring people. Every year at Christmas time, I frame pictures for all the people who work in Infusion 7, from the janitors to the doctors, whether they're my doctors or not. I frame a picture and sign it for them. And it's called the Cancer Collection. And every year, probably the best day that I have in that year is when somebody shows me a picture of like 10 of my pictures hanging over their sofa.
Oh, that's
But
really cool.
it's a way of giving back to these wonderful human beings who care about you. And
Yeah.
absolutely. My caregivers are two golden retrievers.
I've
They
seen
don't,
one of them walking around in the
yeah,
background.
the other one's asleep on the sofa behind me. But I fed them about an hour before this so they would be calm and relaxed. A good friend of mine, his wife got diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. He quit his job. He'd done well enough to save the money and personally took care of his wife for 5 years until she passed. And I kept on saying, his name was Randy. I said, Randy, you need help doing this. If you don't
Hmm.
take care of yourself, you can't take care of her.
That's right.
And he said, Glenn, I've got this, don't worry. And it aged him a lot,
Yeah.
but he's such a wonderful human being that he knew he was doing good. Does that make sense? He knew that he was doing good by what he was doing. He knew that he was making somebody else's life better. And
Sacrificing his a little bit in a way.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's in a good relationship. Both people do more than 50%. And Randy was doing 90% because he had to bathe her at the end. And he did enough working out that he could pick up his wife and bathe her. But
Amazing.
that's the most extreme I've ever seen.
In closing, I'd love to know what advice would you give somebody?
Here's the thing, only you can stop you. Okay. Once you know that and believe that, it opens all the doors. Because if your organization is holding you back, in today's world, you can change. Now, I say that I was offered 3 times my compensation for probably 8 years in a row by another institution because I could build organizations. They offered me 3 times what I was making. That was in the many millions of dollars. I didn't take it because I had built this organization and I was loyal to the people. But that's a rare thing.
Yeah.
So just just like you're responsible for your own healthcare, if you need to build a team for your cancer, you build it. You have to know that you can do anything. So let me give you an example of that personally. I went to 4 high schools, and so my senior year, I went to my fourth. Dad had retired from the Army. They asked if I wanted to finish at one high school in Ohio or move to where they were going to live permanently in Florida. I said, let's move to Florida, whatever. I was so used to moving, it didn't matter. But I got to the new high school. They had a test in the time called the Florida Senior Placement Test. And a teacher told my parents in the second week of school, I'd already taken the test. Didn't have the results. That I shouldn't go to college. I should go to trade school. She'd made that judgment after 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that, all the teachers are huddling up and whispering and talking. And when they see me, they turn away. It was just, I mean, I knew something was going on. It turned out that I was the first person in the history of the school to get a perfect score on that test. Okay.
Impressed.
So the new kids' parents are told that I go to trade school, I should go to college, and yet I get the perfect score on the test. And I could go to any university I wanted to after that. And at the end of the next year, after the first semester in college, I was #1 at the university for all freshmen in my rank. And I ran into that teacher over Christmas break when I was on a date going to a movie with her and her husband. And I probably was not the most politic at the time. But I asked her if she had ever had a 4.0. And I said, oh, yeah, you went to a teacher school, so you probably did. But you didn't get into the University of Florida, which was the academic school of Florida then and now. And I said, I'm ranked #1 out of all of the freshmen after the first semester. I did pretty well.
Yes,
I
I should
said,
say so.
now let me ask you a question. Do you think you have the judgment skills to tell parents what their kids can do and can't do? I said, I know the answer to that, but do you know the answer yet? I said, you shouldn't be doing that. Don't try to limit people. If I had paid attention to her, my life would have been completely different. If my parents had paid attention to her, it would have been different. But believe it or not, you can do anything you put your mind to. There is creativity in every person in the world.
Yeah.
You just
I
got to
believe
unlock,
that.
you got to unlock the door. So take that skills that you have and maximize your life. But the way you really maximize your life is my uncle one day asked my mom whether I was rich or wealthy. And my mom just looked at him and said, he's wealthy and that has nothing to do with money. You don't let other people stop you. It's just
Right.
nuts.
Did you ever get frustrated when you were building a business and say, this isn't going the way I wanted?
I was the CEO of a company and one of the directors was doing something that was inappropriate. It was a
Mm,
company I founded. And I'm a securities lawyer. I know what the rules are.
right.
So I resigned. And
Okay.
so I was still a senior partner in my law firm full time and working full time as a CEO of a company. And my son was about 6 months old. In retrospect, probably should have confronted the director and made him resign, but I don't think he would have.
Mm,
And that would have
mhm,
been just a nasty mess. And at the time, it was not a noisy resignation. Today, it probably would have been.
mm,
As I said, there were things going on that I didn't approve of. So I left an organization I started, and that was very hard to do, but it was the right thing to do because there's no way you could adequately perform as a CEO of a public company. We were growing revenue every quarter by 100%. It's just really an insane number,
yeah.
not sustainable. But, and then you've got a law firm that is growing into one of the best law firms in the East Coast. And I had a new son. And the one other lesson I will tell people today is I wish I didn't created this phrase, but how do children spell love? It's not quality. It's called time. People say quality time. I do quality time with my kid. No, you're missing immense amounts of time with your child.
Right. Yeah.
So my best days today are with my grandson Sam. They're absolutely the best days. And last year I had the privilege of teaching him how to play golf. And I'm going to say this and nobody will believe it. But after a week, I took him out. We played from 150 yards in on our club. And he shot 36 on 9 holes.
He's got an incredible coach. He's
Yes.
got the skills and talent to go with it,
Well,
right?
he's athletic. And
Yeah.
but the point is, there's a way to teach golf that's a lot simpler than most pros teach. It's so simple, it's ridiculous. And so I teach people I teach them with a driver first. And I use paint on the ground to get where your left foot's supposed to be and where you're supposed to put the tee. And once you do that, he was hitting the ball 150 yards at 5. And it was so much fun to watch him do it. And he had no clue how spectacular his performance was. The driving range were watching it and couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And somebody accompanied me and he drove every hole in one. He got it on every hole in one stroke. So
Unbelievable.
yeah, and so he got a 36. He wasn't great at putting yet, but his first scorecard says he's got even par. So he
Right.
was a 6-year-old. This is not true. He couldn't have a handicap that is, you got to have more than one round or more than 9 holes. But his handicap based on that, if all of his rounds were that good, would be a scratch golfer at 5. But the point was, we just had fun. The thing about Sam has rules for my son-in-law and my daughter. They cannot come, neither of them can come to visit me by themselves without bringing. Sam says, I have to be with you on every trip to see grandpa.
Oh,
And
so it's true what they say that life is better with grandkids.
absolutely,
Yeah.
well, they were supposed to come for spring break, but they're both so busy in their work, and the one's head of marketing for a big company, and the other's starting a new business, and they just are having a real problem getting the time for it. So I said,
Right.
okay, we're gonna get my dogs and I are getting in my truck. I'm renting an Airbnb for a month, and Sam's gonna move in with me for that month, and I'll get him to kindergarten. But we're gonna play golf and throw footballs and go to Top Golf and do all sorts of things. I hope the listeners understand that. One of the reasons you take the medicines that give you energy is if you have children or grandchildren, it'll give you the ability to get up and do what they do. And then you take the medicines that address chemo brain, and you may have to change a couple to get it right. But once it's right, you're going to have the cognitive function you had when you were in your 20s. So if you have the energy and the cognitive function that you need, and I've got that, right, then it's amazing what you can do. But start off with building memories for your family. Do things with them. And if you've got grandchildren or children, again, they spell love Time, and it's not quality time, it's the volume of time. If it's
Yep.
sitting on the sofa watching a football game or a game show or something you want to watch on TV, that's not really quality time, but it is because every minute is quality time. But you need huge blocks of quality time. So when you're communicating with doctors, how important do you think it is for them to know that you want to live and you want to live in a high quality life, that you can't accept anything less than that?
Yeah. You have to share that with them. They can't expect everybody has that same desire.
You're right. If you do that, what do you think's going to happen to the quality of care you get versus being a person who doesn't do that? My supposition is that you're going to get a lot better quality of care if the doctor knows you're in it for the long term and you're going to do everything right.